It's wonderful to have you here in London at Brand Global, Ajit. I'm looking forward to your keynote, but I thought we could get a little preview from you. Could you tell us some of the best practices and learnings from the global success of Lenovo.com?
Hey, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I think it's wonderful to be in this setting. I've been to London many times, but I've never been in this setting, so I really appreciate the opportunity. So today's presentation, when I first spoke to Nitish, it was really trying to figure out what aspects of global branding we can talk to your audience. The biggest journey that we have gone through in the last 8 years that I've been with Lenovo has been a true transformation of taking a company that's predominantly a Chinese brand to become a global brand. And along the ways, we picked up some things. I don't know whether they're best practices, but they are practices that have worked for us. So I'd leave it at that. So a couple of things that I'm going to talk about today is really brand transition. So how do brands that predominantly play in a particular space, like the PC space that we are in, and how do they actually transition into a multi-brand, multi-country setup and take on a very different type of competition? So, we've been focused on people like Dell and HP and Samsung, who are really, really formidable players, but they act and play in a certain space. And now we are talking about taking on the players like Apple and Samsung in a global setting. And so we really cannot do what we did in the past to be successful in the future. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about specifically is how we are using the new age marketing techniques to try and get a semblance of an arbitrage in the marketplace so we can compete effectively. So that's really the theme of the conversation.
Interesting. It sounds really interesting. Yes, and I guess Lenovo is adding other products.
That's right.
Right? You've acquired, is it Motorola from Google?
Yeah, it's still not done, but we have made the intent clear, so that transaction is still pending, so we can't talk too much about that. But we did close the server acquisition from IBM, which just closed as of yesterday or day before.
Oh, you
yesterday.
did?
Yes, it did. Yes.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, so that was a big one for us. So yeah, clearly we are now a company that's looking at enterprise products, so servers and storage and all that stuff. Plus, we are looking at traditional PC products, which is PCs and tablets and phones to a certain extent. And then we'll think about forward-looking infrastructure, cloud, that sort of solutions in terms of how we leverage that predominantly to help our consumers and our ecosystem. So those are the three distinct pieces.
What are some of Lenovo's biggest markets?
So we are very, very strong in Asia. Clearly, China is our hometown, where we have 35+ market share, so we clearly dominate there. But believe it or not, in the PC space, we are number one in about 35 countries.
Really?
So it is quite a remarkable achievement, considering that we were only number one in one country in 2006. So in the last...
So you were able to, talking about transition from the IBM brand. It was dual brand for a while, right? IBM, Lenovo, and then it became only Lenovo. But it sounds that transition was done very successfully.
In hindsight, yes. But when we were going through the transition, it was actually a very complicated and difficult decision because it was always, there were always people on both sides. IBM is such an iconic brand, and trying to disassociate with the brand, it required us to really think through what that actually meant, because we actually had a 5-year agreement since 2005, the day of the acquisition, to transition the brand. And we decided to actually transition it much sooner. Because,
oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, you spent it
we did not spend the 5 years, so we actually...
Oh, how interesting.
2008. So within 2 years, we decided that we were going to divest out of the IBM brand and make it ThinkPad from Lenovo, because we felt like it would actually teach us some very valuable lessons. And we knew that down the line, we'll have to make some big acquisitions, so we'd have to face similar challenges. So we wanted to make sure that was done.
Kind of a dry run with the ThinkPad.
Yeah, and by the way,
this has gotten very good reviews.
Exactly. So ThinkPad continues to, we maintain it as iconic brand. We haven't changed the fundamentals. We design it in Japan. We have not changed the manufacturing. So the basic tenets of what ThinkPad represents is still kind of captured, and we kind of pride in kind of keeping that heritage going.
As you look ahead, you've been there 8 years now, looking ahead, assuming you'll be there, what do you see coming down at you? What do you see the major challenge in your position?
I think it's really trying to figure out how to facilitate a two-way conversation with consumers. It's become, it used to be so much more push marketing, and now it's so much more pull. And so when you really go into a pull-based marketing, you're really trying to facilitate a two-way conversation. The more fluid and more inclusive you are, the better off you are going to be as a brand. At least that's our basic philosophy. I do know that some of the other brands probably are not there and they have a very different philosophy, but we feel being more inclusive actually helps us. And in almost every case, and I talk about this today in my presentation, in almost every case we feel that could be an arbitrage for you if you leverage that properly.
Mm-hmm. How interesting. Part of being in a leading role in a global company in the marketing field, you must be watching other brands, not necessarily in the same space. What are some of the brands that you admire that you feel like are really on top of their game?
So I particularly, and this is nothing to do with Lenovo, so these are my personal opinions.
Exactly, yes.
I like a few brands for a few specific reasons. One of the brands I really admire is Red Bull. So I think Red Bull has taken marketing to a completely different level. They have figured out how to connect with audiences in a way and with a scale that has never been seen before. And the funny part is they really don't talk about their products that much. They talk about their philosophy and their brand tenet much more than their products, which I find is amazing and also very risky at the same time. The other brand that I really like is GoPro, which is another, I think, a brilliant brand, and they drive their strategy brilliantly, primarily based on consumer insights and consumer feedback. Those are two good brands that I would say are going to be relevant, and I'm going to talk about both of those brands as part of my presentation because we do draw inspiration from them. Traditional brands, I like Coke. Which will never, I think, go out of style. They continue to push the envelope in terms of creativity and what they do. And so I look at these brands that are really cutting edge and doing things that, every time I look at them, I feel like, wow, that's a smart idea, and why didn't I think about that? Right. So I draw inspiration from these.
And I think the challenge that I see in a lot of these global brands, and talking about Coke brings it back. You can't afford to do same old. So you do new, and sometimes you have a misstep, right? Because in the cultural sphere, it can be very tricky, right? Yes. Some people aren't happy for you to, like, I'm thinking of that commercial with the national anthem being sung in different languages.
Yes.
To me, that made me feel warm and fuzzy, but clearly there were some people who thought this was sacrilegious.
Yes.
To have the American national anthem sung by non-native speakers, clearly, or in their own native language. But that makes the marketing field also so exciting, because it gives it's a tremendous field for creativity, trying new things, and that makes me thrilled to be organizing an event like Brand to Global. And particularly also what it is it's changing continuously, like you were talking about, how at Lenovo you are dealing with transitions. I think everyone else is as well. Sometimes it's internally generated. Something happens within the company, an acquisition, or reminded of a talk from last year where SAP was talking about how they more or less ran out of big customers because everyone who needed SAP and could afford it had it.
Yeah.
And they needed to reconfigure their marketing to make it convince mid-sized companies that they should also consider SAP.
Right.
But that required a much more personalized and also much more a pull approach than a push approach. And then you have the whole technology, social media thing where a year is a very long time, right? And suddenly there's a new translation technology, and we have a lot of interesting vendors here that are offering new solution because, going very back to the beginning of our talk, this personalization, this speaking to your individual customer is a huge challenge because, obviously you can't employ, you can't have an employee to truly talk to 10 customers. So it needs to be automated without really obviously being automated, because otherwise it will turn on you.
That's right.
And people will be turned off by some machine, when it becomes obvious that it's just a machine making it sound like there's a human person on the other.
That's right, and not to mention privacy and other issues.
That's right, that's privacy issue. Any other thoughts before we, that you feel like sharing, or experiences, recommendations before we end the interview?
So the only thing that I would leave is with the thought that we are actually very fortunate to be in this space at this time, because I think marketing in general is going through a massive transformation. I don't think marketing has ever gone through this dramatic of a transformation since kind of the move from newsprint, TV to digital. And now I think we are moving from digital to social and mobile. And I think that transition is a much bigger and significant transition for marketing. My sense is that in 10 years' time, the face of marketing will change so dramatically that we would look back on this and say, really, what were we doing 10 years ago? So I feel very fortunate to be in that space at this time. So
great. Well, and we are fortunate to have you here. And again, I look forward to your keynote and other presentations here at the conference.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.